Hello, and welcome to Living History. My name's Carl Jarecki, and my special guest today is Janet Rothschild. Thank you for coming in and speaking with us.
You're very welcome.
How are you doing today?
Surviving, as I say.
Good for you. Well, we talked a little bit before we actually came into the studio, and you were telling me all kinds of wonderful stories of things you've done in your life. I'd like you to share just a little bit about where you've been, when you came to the Conejo Valley, and what you've been doing.
Well, I came to the Conejo Valley in 1948. Prior to that, I had been working in Hollywood, which is where I met my husband-to-be through a mutual friend. And at that point, when I met him, he was out here in the Thousand Oaks area, living on a ranch, 221 acres of ground, back in the days, as we said, BC, before civilization. There were 600 and some odd people here when he came from what is now Westlake Boulevard to the grade. And when I came in 48, there were about 1,200.
Wow.
Now look at what we have.
Yeah, not very many people at all. What was it like? It was pretty much just rolling.
Well,
farming.
everything we did, we had to do out of town. There was a little strip down on what is now Thousand Oaks Boulevard, which was 101 in those days, and two-lane little road, and the part of town was up by where the Oakdale Market was. That was the only market in town, and across the street was the post office, and there was an osteopath's office, and there was practically nothing here. Everything we did, we had to either go to Santa Barbara, Oxnard, or Los Angeles.
What was your preference? Los Angeles?
I didn't care.
Either way was
No,
fine
yeah,
with you.
it was fun.
Actually,
way.
we're talking about the Conejo Valley in 1948. Is that right?
1948 when I came, yeah.
Right,
yeah,
but you
yeah.
you were actually a working woman way before that. Tell me about
Before women's lib, remember?
That's right. Tell me about the World's Fair in New York City in 1939.
That's when I left St. Louis and went to New York at urging by my sister, who had left St. Louis, and she was living in New York and working there, but she had taken shorthand and typing at school, so she had a job as a secretary, but I didn't have that. I could do nothing. I majored in history and minored in philosophy in school, and that was about all I could do. And so anyway, I finally decided, okay, I'll come to New York. And when I went to New York and looking for a job, they were just starting employing for the World's Fair. And so I was hired by the World's Fair to work in the Town of Tomorrow, which was a bunch of houses showing off all the various equipment and structure.
What were they showing in the House of Tomorrow?
In the House of Tomorrow, when the house that I was in, it was the Nash Kelvinator house, and it was the beginning of air cooling systems.
Air conditioning?
No, it wasn't air conditioning. Air cooling was first.
Cooling.
Air conditioning came later.
Ah.
Air cooling was where you blew on the water, which would cool the air within the buildings. And so I had to explain all this to all the people that came in. They asked questions. And it was fun because there was never a man that came into that house that I was in that didn't try his best to catch me up on something about the system that I couldn't answer. But I could always answer his questions.
Right. Men were dubious of your ability to describe the technical
operations of air cooling. Well, this was kind of a strange thing for a woman in 1945, if you recall. And then when the fair was over, Nash Kelvinator wanted me to come to Detroit to work. And I said, what the heck would I do? And they said, you could sell. I said, no way. Thank you.
But you actually went into another profession after that.
Then I met a friend of mine one day for lunch, went back to her office to get something that she had for me. It was a girl that I had worked at the fair with. And when I went back to the office, a woman from the inner office came out and wanted to know if I was there for an interview. And my friend said, no, she just came to pick up something else. And the woman said to me, would you like to fill out an application? I said, sure. So I filled out an application. And a week later, she called me up and hired me.
Now, what was the job
And
for?
this company was Hooper Ratings. Hooper had worked with Gallup, the poll guy, and decided that he was going to do radio instead of working on what Gallup was working on. So he left Gallup and started his own company, and they were rating the radio programs that were on the air at that time, and the whole process was called Hooper Ratings. So I went in there as a tabulator, worked on interviewing sheets, and gradually worked up in the office. And in 1945, Hooper called me into his office and asked me how I would like to go to Chicago to open an office. And I said, why are you asking me instead of all these other people, men in the office?
To go to Chicago.
To go to Chicago and open an office. And he said, you really want to know? And I said, yes. And he said, first of all, you have a way with people, and secondly, you can hold your booze.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Because this was the days of the martini lunches, and every time you took out a client, you had to drink along with them. If they drank, you drank too.
That's right.
And that drink was the martini.
So would you drink with them and then make your sale, or how did that work?
Well, what I was doing mostly was explaining Hooper's reports, how the system worked, how you used it in your system, in your business. And in other words, he not only rated radio programs, but he did stuff on advertising. He gave reports out on advertising that was on the radio. And he also did stuff for magazines and newspapers.
So you were involved in the original
Hooper Ratings.
Ratings of radio programs. That's great. Which eventually it turned into, like in television, Nielsen ratings.
Well, Nielsen,
right.
Nielsen came along. Nielsen came along before I left Hooper, but he was not the name that he was. As a matter of fact, he more or less took over, because Hooper had gone into television, and Nielsen kind of took over that. When Hooper died, he died in a plane crash, and when he died, Nielsen more or less took over his business.
So let's go back to the Conejo Valley for a moment. What sticks out in your mind? What is your earliest memories of the Conejo Valley back in those days?
Well, first of all, there wasn't a damn thing to do. There
No
were
movie theaters,
there
no
were
nothing.
only about, when I came here, there were only about 1,200 people from what is now Westlake Boulevard to the grade, and there was absolutely nothing here to do.
Mm-hmm.
So anything we did, we had to go either into Hollywood, into Los Angeles, to the theater, to Santa Barbara, Oxnard for dinner. There were several places over there by the water that were nice that we went to.
Mm. So as Thousand Oaks has changed, obviously,
Oh my goodness.
in ways that include population and housing, is there anything you miss, or has the change been good?
Well, this is one thing I will say. When it's all started, there were a group, including my husband, about, maybe 5 or 6 people, that were worried that we were going to become another San Fernando Valley, because the county, who was controlling everything, we were not a city then, didn't care what happened here. They were very jealous because this end of the county was becoming better than the rest of the county. So this group of people decided to form a city, which is why Thousand Oaks became a city as early as it did, so they could control the growth. And this is one thing I will say that they accomplished. It has grown tremendously, but it has been a very well-organized growth.
So Thousand Oaks, in your mind, is not a San Fernando Valley?
Not in any way or shape or form.
So the question is answered.
Right.
That's wonderful. If you had to describe Thousand Oaks to somebody who lived out of town or out of the state, how would you describe the city?
Yeah, I think it's a charming suburban area.
Well,
it
that's
has
pretty-
everything you need.
Now we have everything.
Everything you
we
need.
didn't have it back then, but
Didn't
now
have
we've
it then.
gotten it.
Now you have it.
That's
In
good.
small way, not in big metropolitan way like major cities.
Mhm.
And This is one of the things I like about the fact that they control the growth in Thousand Oaks. This was one of the moves made fairly early after we became a city to keep it from becoming, instead of having too many houses. And now, as I understand it, there's a limited number of houses that can be built in this area.
That's right. It's part of the general plan.
Yep.
And build out.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
In your opinion, which person do you think had the biggest impact on the development of the Conejo Valley? Anybody in particular?
Not anybody in particular stands out in my mind. No.
You mentioned your husband. What did he do? What was his
Nothing.
profession? Nothing?
Actually, he went to Cornell, to college, was an engineer, but by education. But he came to Hollywood years ago, very early years, and 1929, I think, is when he came here. And he worked in the, no, he came in earlier than that. He came about 23. And he worked at the studios. Prior to that, he had worked in real estate, but didn't do that too seriously. And he was fortunate enough that he didn't have to work. He had a trust that he drew on, that he could live on. So all of these things that he did was just for his own amazement and pleasure. And then he went to work at the Universal Studios. And he got fed up with that because of what was going on in the motion picture business, and he just quit it. And that's when he bought the ranch out here.
What was going on in the motion picture industry?
Well, it was just people doing things like in most businesses, you know, where you're not very, what's the word I want?
Was it changes that were taking place?
No, it's not just the changes. It's not crooked either, but just taking advantage of situations and people and all, and he just didn't like that at all.
Wasn't interested.
No.
What has been your greatest personal accomplishment?
I don't know. I think most of my life has been dedicated to helping other people. As a matter of fact, when I was a younger person in college, I went down to a poor farm. Actually, I was in high school when I started this. They had a poor farm in the St. Louis area, Eureka, Missouri, where they sent the settlement kids for the summer. And we would have a shipment every 2 weeks of new kids. And we, as the counselors for these kids at the camp, would be down at the railroad station when the kids were put on the train to go to Eureka. Wyman Farm was the name of it. And we would go with them, and then we would come back with them, be home for a weekend. They would be there for about 10 days. We would be there over a weekend, go back to the Union Station, pick up another group, and go back. I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then I worked with, I don't know, even when I came out here, I did what I could for people, not a job, but just something to keep me occupied and help other people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, the city
And I'm
has-
now working still for our Mad Attic, the thrift shop for St. Patrick's Episcopal Church,
Oh, good
which
for
we've
you.
had for 40 years. I was in the beginning of that. And I don't know whether you know anything about it, but that's an organization that we give things to the church if it's not in their budget to buy something for them or fix something. But most of our money goes into the community. We give scholarships to the schools, high schools, and we donate to various and sundry organizations.
Well, that's a wonderful legacy.
That's what it's for. It's to help the people in the community.
Since you've been here for a good piece, what do you think the biggest challenges for this community going out into the future?
Our biggest challenge? I think we've met our biggest challenge, really, by keeping the city, making the city what it is and letting people know when they come here what it is and how far they can go. I don't think it will ever become rundown community.
How would you like people to remember you?
I don't think that many people even know me at this point. So many new
Well,
people.
they will now.
So many new people in the community that I'm not really known.
As
I
somebody,
think my husband's name might be, because very often I have met people for the first time and they said, "Oh, you're the family that lived on the hill."
that's right, with a great view.
Yeah.
So, what's the one thing that's come to Thousand Oaks for entertainment purposes that you've enjoyed the most? Is it when the first movie theater arrived, or a bookstore?
I don't even remember when the first movie theater arrived. I think the first movie theater that we had was the one up at Ralph's, but I can't remember exactly that. I was very pleased when they started the theater here, the center. Matter of fact, I contributed to that.
You did?
Yes.
Have you been to a performance?
I have not been to any
Oh,
performance.
you must go.
Well, the bad part is that for many, many, many years we had series in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
and most everything that's been out here I had seen.
Already, yes.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully one of the theaters will put something on that will entice you to come and enjoy what...
Well, no, my idea of this was the community needed this desperately. And I think this was one of the finest things that happened to the community, because
Yeah.
we had the arts right here
Absolutely.
instead of having to travel.
So far, yes.
Yeah, either to
see
Santa
them.
Barbara or to.
Is there any question I haven't asked you yet? Is there anything we haven't talked about that we should? Is there anything you would like to talk about?
I think I've talked enough.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming today. It's a fascinating, fascinating history. And
Well, I've enjoyed all my years in Thousand Oaks. I've
Great.
seen it grow and develop, met an awful lot of people.
well, hopefully you'll have
And
many more.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.